miracle of Francis is how the Italian press described yesterday's meeting between the U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at St. Peter's Basilica. It was the first conversation between the presidents since the famous argument at the White House. Renewing this relationship is crucial to a just end to the war. This is really important for world peace. You can talk in these terms. It's not just about regional peace, it's about world peace. The Ukrainian president did not hide his satisfaction with the meeting.
We had a productive meeting. I don't want to go to a lot of details, if it's possible, because the questions, very sensitive questions on, of course, totally it's about how to bring peace.
Interestingly, shortly after his conversation with Zelensky, Donald Trump published a post on social media hitting Vladimir Putin. With all of that being said, there was no reason for Putin to be shooting missiles into civilian areas, cities, and towns over the last few days. It makes me think that maybe he doesn't want to stop the war. He's just tapping me along and has to be dealt with differently through banking or secondary sanctions. Too many people are dying. Not surprisingly, yesterday's leaders' meeting revived hopes for a breakthrough in peace negotiations. But what is most important to me? Maybe it is in the religious aspect that this conversation took place here. Perhaps this will be the place that will specifically inspire the two leaders to find a solution that will finally prove effective and that will bring this war to an end. Such a scenario would be Francis's wish fulfillment. The Holy Father in his last public speech sought peace. In the face of the numerous wars that have raged in recent years, bringing with them inhumane atrocities, countless victims, and destruction, Pope Francis has constantly spoken out, pleading for peace. He called for reason and fair negotiations to seek possible solutions, because he used to say, war only means the death of people, the destruction of homes, hospitals, and schools. War always leaves the world worse than it was before. It is always a painful and tragic defeat for everyone. However, Francis's teaching was also full of more down-to-earth guidance. And why at a certain point in the Mass, the priest who presides over the liturgy says, "Put your hearts up." He does not say, "Put your cell phones up to take a picture." No, this is a wrong thing. For me, it is a great annoyance when I celebrate Mass here in the square or in the Basilica and I see a lot of raised phones. This bit of teaching was apparently not known to some members of the official Polish delegation who showed up at the Vatican for the Pope's funeral. At such an important moment, the second person in the state, Szymon Hołownia, could not resist the temptation to take photos, which even his coalition partners criticized. Nearly 200,000 people and more than 150 delegations are saying goodbye to Pope Francis. But that's no reason to act like a high school student on a trip. A little seriousness, Mr. Marshal of the same Szymon Hołownia. Well, hello, crew. Today we're on a cool school trip. The teacher is not watching. The sun is shining. The Pope is dead. I'm the brother of a priest. Peace out, and please subscribe. Poland's Marshal of the same does not see the problem and explains that he was not taking a selfie, but was photographing the crowd gathered in St. Peter's Square. One must have no shame to spin a political war at such a moment. For the Pope's funeral, I invited people in crisis of homelessness to the plane. These are representatives of a group that Francis helped in a special way. We pray, experience, document, and remember forever. For those interested, I attach evidence of what is most important today: a Vatican full of mourners, including lots of our compatriots. I think Mr. Marshal of the same counted on the fact that this could somehow help him in his campaign there, but it's such a culture taken from TVN. Dismissive. The funeral, however, is a very serious moment. It's not a school trip. However, playing a photojournalist is not the only slip-up of the Marshal of the Sejm. Szymon Hołownia, along with Polish Deputy Prime Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, tried to occupy chairs in the first rows. Colleagues from the third way must have been filled with embarrassment when, after a while, they were shown a third way to more distant seats. The This is the first such serious declaration by the most important person in the country. Polish President Andrzej Duda has announced that he will vote for Karol Nawrocki in 3 weeks. I, Andrzej Duda, have the same right as you to go to the elections and cast my vote. I will vote for Karol Nawrocki in this election because I believe that this is a man who will strive and do everything to make Poland a fair country. This is a strong support in the campaign. Nearly 10.5 million Polish people voted for President Andrzej Duda in the last election. Now, as the president points out, even more mobilization is needed because most of the mainstream media today favor the liberal camp. I am here and I'm standing here to say, you must mobilize as you did in 2015 and 2020. The Polish president got involved in the election campaign because Rafał Trzaskowski's win will strengthen Donald Tusk's rule, which means potentially more years without major investments for Poland. I have listened today when Donald Tusk said, as he did recently in Gniezno, that the security of Poland that he is building will be its pillar. God grant that this man will carry out those tasks that Poland has taken on and those contracts that Poland has concluded during the reign of the United Right. Because so far, throughout this whole time, I don't see the production of K2 tanks in Poland together with South Korea, which should have started long ago. Somehow, it still hasn't happened. I would like to see all these purchases implemented and completed because this is an extremely important task. The president's vote is also a response to a possible system closure scenario if the elections are won by the Civic Platform candidate. The December 13th coalition will gain full power without any control, and this could mean further repression of political opponents. It is a tragedy of the Republic of Poland that today leading politicians like Donald Tusk come out to the media and talk about the rule of law, dare to say that this is the restoration of the rule of law, and it is tragic. The liberal left European elites either nod to them or pretend not to see it. They pretend that they don't see that more people are being locked up, or that they want to lock them up, that ordinary officials, women, are being locked up, that they are treated like people who are associated with organized crime, shackled to their arms and legs, women who worked and did ordinary office work for the Polish state, performing tasks that were assigned to them as part of the public administration. And who is doing this? It's the man who was recently the spokesman for citizens' rights. He is the one who is directly responsible for this, but we know very well on whose orders this is being done. The past year and a half has shown that the narrative about the alleged lack of rule of law was just a story to win elections. In reality, the government has not introduced any reforms to restore the rule of law. On the contrary, the Ministry of Justice is taking more illegal actions, and media outlets that talk about it are being threatened with license revocation. Free media must be defended because they are just trying to abolish them. They are just trying to deprive them of their concessions. How? Through the systems we fought against for 8 years. They have to be defended, and there has to be someone to defend them, because if they are gone, then we don't know what will happen to Poland. During his speech, President Duda recalled the presidency of Lech Kaczyński, whose words and actions proved prophetic for the events in our part of Europe. Today, the right man to continue Lech Kaczyński's policies, according to the president, is Karol Nawrocki.
Zróbcie to!
U.S. Secretary of Energy Chris Wright has begun a visit to Poland. This is, among other things, the result of solicitations for the meeting from the office of the president. We, as a presidential team, so to speak, solicited him to come because we were concerned that things were not going very well with this investment, that there were simply massive delays there. After Donald Tusk and his team took over, they clearly started slowing down this investment as well as many others. Because Donald Tusk Tusk's team has been talking a lot since taking power in Poland about continuing programs started during the Law and Justice government. The problem is that it only talks. This is also the case with the nuclear power plants that the Americans were supposed to build in Poland. This is pushing the Americans out of Europe, Americans who are thousands of kilometers away to be here and actually defend us directly, also through soldiers. 100,000 American soldiers who are in Europe, 10,000 of them in Poland. Then they must have a business here. That's why the current authorities have led Law and Justice to freeze the framework contract signed with the Americans for the construction of nuclear power plants in our country. The Polish government doesn't think about the Americans being here at all. It just pushes them out precisely because it doesn't see to the contracts and they expire. This is an act to the detriment of the security of the Polish state, and for that, this authority will answer. And Prime Minister Tusk, as usual, instead of specifics, weaves stories, this time about the new doctrine of his power.
Doktrynę piastowską.
Piast doctrine, a doctrine based on force. I'll tell you, we're really going to catch up with the biggest economies like Germany's, like Japan's, within a few years. On the nuclear energy issue, did Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk yield to your persuasion on the matter, that it should be brought to a signature as soon as possible? Mr. Donald Tusk has brought, so to speak, disinformation and the ability to sow propaganda that completely contradicts the facts to near perfection. Tomorrow, Donald Tusk is expected to sign a bridge nuclear agreement with the Americans for Poland. But looking at the fate of previous construction contracts concluded by the United Right with the United States, in which little has happened since the coalition took power on December 13th, one can predict how it will be this time as well. Why is that? Because the Germans don't want there to be nuclear in Europe. They don't want there to be nuclear in Poland. The Germans are fighting nuclear power very strongly, and especially they are fighting the energy independence of Poland. Donald Tusk is trying to make up for it with some promises, prolonging the hopes of Poles for building a strong, secure Poland. All the more so because Tusk's traditional power ally is Germany, and the current prime minister has a strong track record of delaying contracts with the Americans. Today, such fundamental elements, one is the presence of the U.S. Army, the other is the base in Redzikowo, two things that President Lech Kaczyński once spoke about when he said that it is fundamental at the moment for American military investments to be in Poland, because military investments are followed by military secrets, which are especially closely guarded. Because during the first government of the Civic Platform, at the beginning of the Tusk-Putin reset, when the former U.S. President George W. Bush in 2008 proposed to the late President Lech Kaczyński to build an installation in Poland to shoot down intercontinental missiles from Iran, Donald Tusk said the following at the time. He began the conversation after a very cordial introduction with a very simple question. But tell me, says President Bush, are you for or against the shield? He asked for a one-word answer. Yes, but we're not blind. Radosław Sikorski, the former and current head of the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, led negotiations on the missile shield with Putin's Russia. Poland would be ready to agree that the Russian side should have access to industrial monitoring of the shield site, and that it should have permanent access, not to be confused with permanent presence. But the original installation at Redzikowo envisioned a permanent presence of at least 8,000 U.S. troops, even then at the beginning of the 21st century. The same is true of arms contracts negotiated under the Law and Justice government. Because the Tusk government, as early as last June, despite promises to continue contracts, led to the expiration of the contract for the Polish-Korean consortium that was to produce K2 tanks in Poznań, and since taking power has done nothing about the purchase of 500 long-range HIMARS rocket launchers from the United States, despite the fact that the transfer of such a large amount of this equipment was agreed to by the U.S. Congress. Therefore, the stakes of the upcoming presidential election are very high. This is that alternative on May 18th, a safe Poland or Poland in danger. We must all be aware of this regardless of which political party we sympathize with. We must be aware that this is a choice between a Poland that is safe and a Poland in danger. I will lead you to a Poland that is safe. After the recent actions of the Berlin-dominated Brussels, it is well seen that Poland needs a return to proven allies from the United States. And that's also what this presidential election is about. The tragic death toll from a powerful explosion at a port in southern Iran has risen to 28. More than 1,000 people have been injured. An explosion of chemical materials is believed to have occurred. The explosion sparked a fire that halted operations at one of the country's largest cargo hubs, Bandar Abbas, on the Arabian Sea. According to preliminary findings, several containers stored at the port exploded. They likely contained dangerous chemicals. Iranian state television reported that the probable cause of the explosion was negligence in handling flammable materials. Petrochemical infrastructure was not affected. Authorities have ordered a special investigation into the explosion. The Interior Minister, who is coordinating the services, arrived at the scene of the tragedy.